They smelled her before they saw her. That's the part no one talks about. Every wolf in Ironvale pack, 243 of them, stopped mid-breath on the same heartbeat. Like something ancient in their blood suddenly remembered what fear tasted like. Then they saw her step out of the tree line. And the laughter died. All of it. Gone. Alpha Kale Draven stood at the front of the crowd, the way he always stood, shoulders back, jaw set, golden eyes catching firelight like he owned the sky itself. He probably thought he did. He used to. His mouth opened. No sound came out, because the woman walking toward him was not the girl he had thrown away. She moved like the dark moved. Smooth. Inevitable. Like something that had always been coming and simply chose tonight to arrive. Her silver hair, she hadn't had silver hair before, floated at her shoulders like smoke that refused to settle. Her skin held a luminance that had nothing to do with the bonfire blazing in the center of the clearing. And her eyes were wrong. Not wrong like broken, wrong like ancient, wrong like something had lived inside her, grown too large, and decided her body was just a vessel it could tolerate for now. Every wolf in the pack took one step back. Every single one. Except Kale. He stood his ground, because that's what alphas do. But his hands were shaking. She stopped 10 feet from him. She tilted her head, and she smiled. Not with warmth. Not with cruelty either. With something in between, the kind of smile that lives in the space between those two things, where the most dangerous truths are kept. Hello, Kale. Her voice had changed too. It carried something underneath it. A resonance. Like a second voice lived just beneath the first, saying things that couldn't be spoken in any human language. He swallowed. Ilara. Her name in his mouth. The same mouth that had spoken her destruction 6 months ago in front of this entire pack. The same mouth that had said, loudly, clearly, without hesitation, that she was nothing, that she would never be anything, that he rejected her. She let the silence stretch between them like a blade. You look like you've seen a ghost. A pause. You almost did. She had died in that forest. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Actually physically, terrifyingly died. And something, had decided not to keep her. But we're not there yet. To understand what she became, you need to understand what they made her. You need to go back to the beginning, to the night everything broke. The night of her rejection, the moon was full. Of course it was. The universe has a cruel sense of timing. Ilara Vale stood in the center of the Ironvale clearing. The same clearing she had grown up running through as a child, bare feet on cool grass, laughing at fireflies. And she could feel every eye on her back like a brand. 200 wolves. Watching. Waiting. She kept her chin up. That was the only thing she could control. Kale stood 3 feet in front of her, and he had never looked more beautiful or more terrifying. He was 24 years old and already shaped like something carved from inevitability. Broad shoulders, dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that used to make her chest ache, golden eyes that saw everything and softened for nothing. Once, just once, those eyes had softened for her. She'd been 16. He'd been 17. He'd reached out and tucked a strand of her brown hair behind her ear during a pack celebration, and the mate bond had snapped between them like a bolt of lightning hitting still water. She'd felt it everywhere. She'd thought he had too. She'd been wrong. Or maybe she'd been right once, and then she'd become a liability. Ilara Vale. His voice carried across the clearing without effort. Alpha voice. The kind that settled into your bones and stayed. You've been brought before the pack tonight because a final decision has been made. She already knew. She'd known for 3 days, since Elder Cora had pulled her aside with that expression. Pity wrapped in practicality, and warned her that the Alpha had made his choice. She'd spent those 3 days trying to prepare herself. It turns out you can't prepare for this. 7 years, Kale said. 7 years since the mate bond was identified between us. He paused, like he was letting the timeline land, like he needed the crowd to feel the weight of it before he dropped the other thing. In 7 years, you have not shifted once. A murmur rolled through the pack. Ilara breathed through her nose. Don't flinch. Don't you dare flinch. Every wolf in Ironvale has their first shift by age 16. Most by 15. His voice was flat now. Deliberate. You are 23 years old. You have no wolf. No shift. No ability to sense pack bonds. No ability to hear the moon. He took 1 step forward. 1. You are, by every standard our pack holds, wolfless. That word, wolfless. She had heard it her entire life. Whispered at first, then spoken plainly, then used as a weapon. She had refused to let it define her. She'd trained harder than anyone. Learned to fight with her body when others fought with their wolf. Studied pack law, pack history, healing. Made herself useful in every way that didn't require a shift. None of it had been enough. Iron Veil Pack, Kale said, his voice lifting now, filling every corner of the clearing, requires an alpha female who can lead, who can fight, who can protect. He met her eyes. For just a moment, just a flicker, something moved through his gaze. She searched for it desperately. Regret, hesitation, some small piece of the boy who had once touched her hair and looked at her like she was the most surprising thing he'd ever found. Then it was gone. His expression settled back into stone. I, Kale Draven, alpha of the Iron Veil Pack, formally and permanently reject the mate bond between myself and Alara Vale. The words hit her like a physical blow. The bond, that warm, golden thread she'd spent 7 years quietly tending, even when he ignored it, even when he dated other women right in front of her, even when he made it clear she was an obligation he resented. That thread didn't just snap. It burned, from the inside out. She made no sound. She would not make a sound. She felt her knees try to buckle and lock them in place through pure, furious will. From somewhere behind her, she heard a soft exhale. Dax, her oldest friend, the only wolf in this pack who had never once looked at her like a problem to be solved. She couldn't look at him. If she looked at him right now, she would cry. And she refused. She refused. Additionally, Kale continued, and she realized with a cold clarity that it wasn't over. By pack law, a wolfless adult who cannot contribute to pack defense cannot hold protected membership status. Elder Cora, standing at the edge of the circle, turned her face away. Even she didn't warn me about this part. Alara Vale is hereby removed from Iron Veil Pack. Kale's voice carried no emotion now. She has 3 days to gather her belongings and vacate pack territory. After 3 days, trespass law applies. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, she would never know who, a low laugh. One laugh. It spread like infection. She turned around before she could stop herself. Not because she was running. Because if she didn't turn, she was going to look at Kale's face for another second. And she was going to say something she couldn't take back. She walked. Slowly. Straight through the middle of the crowd. They parted for her. Not out of respect. Out of discomfort. Like she was a dead thing they didn't want to touch. The laughing faded as she passed. She didn't know if that was better or worse. She made it to the tree line before she heard his footsteps behind her. Alara. Dax. She stopped. She didn't turn around. Don't. Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. Just, don't say anything yet. A beat. Okay. His voice was rough. Okay. She stood at the edge of the forest with her back to everything she had ever known, and she listened to the bonfire crackling behind her, and she breathed and breathed and breathed, and she did not cry. Not yet. Not yet. Chapter 2. She packed in 3 hours. Not because she was efficient, because she didn't have much. The room she'd occupied in the pack's communal East Lodge. Small, clean, with a window that faced the mountain she'd loved since childhood. Held only what she'd carried into it. Books on pack medicine. A worn training journal. 2 changes of clothes that didn't embarrass her. A photograph of her mother, who had died when Alara was 9, who had also never shifted, who the pack had quietly called broken. Like mother, like daughter. She'd heard that whispered her whole life too. She folded her mother's photograph carefully and placed it in the front pocket of her bag, close to her chest. Then she sat on the edge of the stripped mattress, in the quiet, and let herself feel it. All of it. The burning where the bond used to be. The hollow where the pack's collective warmth. That subtle, constant hum of belonging that even she could feel at the edges, wolfless or not, had been surgically removed. The fear. She was 23 years old with no wolf, no pack, no money, and nowhere to go. She was also still alive. She focused on that last part. Dax found her at dawn. He came through the window, because Dax had always come through the window. That was just who he was, and sat on the floor with his back against the wall, long legs stretched out, watching her with those steady hazel eyes that had always made her feel slightly less alone in the world. He looked like he hadn't slept. "You're still here," he said. "I have 2 more days. Where are you going?" She pulled the strap of her bag tighter. "Somewhere." "That's not an answer." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, Come to North Fen. I have a cousin there. Dax. She looked at him. North Fen pack won't take an unclaimed wolfless woman from a pack that just expelled her. That's not how it works. He knew she was right. His jaw tightened the way it did when he hated something but couldn't argue against it. Then stay in the border towns. There's a human settlement at Ashwick Ridge. They don't. I'm not hiding in a human settlement. What's wrong with? Because I'm not going to hide. Her voice came out harder than she intended. She gentled it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go live in the shadow of something safer because I'm afraid. I've been doing that my whole life. He looked at her for a long moment. Ilara. His voice dropped. I know you. You've already decided something. What is it? She hesitated. She hadn't told anyone. Hadn't even fully admitted it to herself. But this was Dax. There's a place, she said carefully. East of the Ashfall border. Past the Dead River. Something shifted in his expression. No. Dax. No. He sat forward, voice low. Urgent. Ilara, that is the hollow. Nobody goes there. Wolves who've gone there have come back. When they come back at all, wrong. You know the stories. I know the stories, she said quietly. I also know that none of those stories were told by wolves who were already losing everything. He stared at her. I have nothing, she said. Dax, look at me. I have nothing. No pack. No mate. No wolf. I'm 23 years old, and the only thing the world has confirmed for me is that I am not enough. Her voice didn't break. She made sure of it. What's in the hollow can't take more from me than's already been taken. The silence between them was the kind that aches. Dax pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. You're going to make me let you walk away, he said finally. You were never holding me. He dropped his hands. And in those hazel eyes she saw something that nearly undid her. Not pity, not protest. Pride. Grief and pride all tangled together. The way they get when someone loves a person who is always going to walk toward the hard thing. Take this. He pressed something into her hand. A compass. Old brass. Warm from his pocket. The needle spun once, then settled. She looked at it. Belonged to my grandmother, he said. She said it always pointed toward the thing you needed most, not north. She almost smiled. That's terrible compass design. Yeah, well. He stood. She was a terrible navigator. But she always ended up exactly where she needed to be. He pulled her into a hug. Fierce, brief. The kind that says everything that can't be said out loud. Then he let her go. She walked out of Ironvale with one bag on her back, a brass compass in her hand, and every eye in the pack turned deliberately, pointedly away. Except Cale's. She felt his gaze on the back of her neck the entire way to the gate. She didn't turn around. She was a mile into the forest when she heard it. Laughter. His laughter. She stopped, turned just slightly. Through the trees, faint but unmistakable, she could see the eastern training field. And on it, moving together, easy and warm, Cale and Seraphine Voss. The beta's daughter. Full-blooded, fast, already legendary for the shift she'd had at 14. Seraphine said something. Cale laughed again. He touched her waist, light, habitual, like he'd done it before. Maybe he had. Probably he had. Ilara turned back to the forest. She walked faster. The compass in her hand vibrated once, or maybe she imagined it, and swung its needle east, toward the hollow, toward the thing she needed most, or toward her death. She kept walking. Chapter 3. It took her 4 days to reach the Dead River. Not because the distance was great, because she kept stopping, kept standing at decision points, crossroads in the forest, the edge of a human town where warm light spilled from a diner window and the smell of coffee and ordinary life drifted out to her, and asking herself the question she was terrified to answer honestly. Are you doing this because you're brave, or because you want to stop feeling this? She didn't always like the answer. On the second night, she made a small fire in the shelter of 2 fallen oaks, and she took out her mother's photograph, and she held it in the firelight. Her mother, Sarah Vale, had been 29 when she died. The official cause was illness. The unofficial cause, the one Ilara had been old enough to understand, but not old enough to fully hold, was that her mother had simply stopped fighting. Not dramatically, not in a single moment, just gradually, quietly, had let the pack's low opinion of her become her own low opinion of herself, until there was nothing left to anchor her to living. I'm not you, Ilara whispered to the photograph. She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it like a promise. I'm not you. I'm going towards something, not away. There's a difference. There has to be a difference. She put the photograph back. She slept. The dead river wasn't dead the way she'd expected. She'd imagined a dry bed, cracked earth, the ghost of water. What she found was stranger. The river still flowed, but the water was dark. Not murky. Dark. Like liquid shadow, moving with slow, deliberate intent, the surface never reflecting the sky above it. No birds. She had noticed that a mile back. The forest had gone quiet by degrees, birds and insects falling silent one by one until she was walking in a soundlessness so complete it felt pressurized. Like the forest was holding its breath. She looked at the compass. The needle pointed across the river. She crossed on a series of stones she tested carefully first. Each one solid, each one dry despite the dark water flowing between them. And when she stepped onto the far bank, she felt it. A pressure change. Like stepping from one room into another. Like the air on this side of the river existed under different rules. Her skin prickled. Every instinct she had. And she had good instincts, always had. It was one of the few things she'd never doubted about herself. Screamed that she had just crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross. Go back, those instincts said. This is not a place for you. She stood there, listening to that voice. Then she thought about Kale's face. Flat. Deliberate. Wolfless. She thought about the laughter. She thought about her mother's photograph and the thing she would not become. She walked forward. The hollow announced itself with smell before sight. The scent hit her, and she stopped dead. It smelled like. She struggled to describe it, even to herself. Ozone. Ice. And underneath that something organic, rich and dark, like earth that had never seen sunlight, like roots going down too deep. And underneath that, something that bypassed her nose entirely and registered somewhere older. Some receptor in her brain that didn't have a name, because no one had ever needed to name it before. Old. This is very, very old. The trees thinned, then opened. The hollow was a natural clearing roughly 40 feet across, perfectly circular in a way that felt intentional. The ground was different here, dark soil, almost black, and growing from it in a ring around the center. Silver flowers she had never seen before and couldn't name. They grew close to the ground, facing inward, their petals thin as paper and slightly luminescent in the gray afternoon light. In the center of the ring, a stone. Just one stone. Half the height of a person, roughly shaped, covered in markings she couldn't read. They didn't look carved. They looked grown, the way wood grain grows, like the markings had always been inside the stone and the stone had simply worn away around them. She moved closer. The silver flowers shifted as she passed them. Not from wind. There was no wind. They just turned, facing her, the way sunflowers track the sun. Except there was nothing sunny about this place, and the motion was far more aware. She stood before the stone. Up close, the markings resolved slightly, not into words she could read, but into shapes she recognized as almost language, like the precursor to every language, the thing that lived before words existed. Her hand lifted. She hadn't decided to raise it. Her palm hovered an inch from the stone's surface. The air between her skin and the rock hummed. Don't, said the rational part of her mind. You don't know what this is. You don't know what it does. Wolves who go and don't come out the same. She pressed her palm flat against the stone. The world went white. Not white like light. White like everything at once. Every sound she had ever heard crashed into her at the same moment. Every scent. Every sensation. The cold stone under her palm and the dead river behind her and the silver flowers turning and her mother's voice from childhood. You are not broken, little heart. You are just unfinished. And Kale's voice, wolfless, wolfless, wolfless. And something else, something so deep it had no sound at all, just weight. A presence. Something in the stone, or beneath it, or around it, or woven into the fabric of this place, turned its attention toward her. She couldn't see it. She couldn't smell it. She could only feel it considering her, the way you feel a massive animal in the dark. Not by evidence, but by instinct, by the way the air rearranges itself around something apex. Then it spoke, not in words, in understanding that arrived fully formed, bypassing language entirely. What do you want? She didn't think about it. She didn't calculate. She answered from whatever place answers come from when you've stripped away everything that isn't true. I want to be something they cannot ignore. A pause. Long. Endless. The kind of pause that reshapes things. That is not what most ask for. I know. Most ask for their wolf. For belonging. For the mate who refused them. I don't want him back. Was that true? Was it? She held the question honestly. Then she had her answer. I don't want him back. I want what I was worth, what I was always worth, to be something no one can argue with anymore. Another pause. Shorter this time. If I give you what you're asking for, you will not be what you were. I know that. You may not be able to come back. I know that too. The presence considered her. She felt it move through her. Not painfully, but thoroughly. Like something reading a text by pressing a hand to the cover and feeling the whole story at once. There is something in you that has never been named, it said finally. You called it weakness because that is what they told you. Her throat tightened. It was never weakness. It was just waiting. It was waiting for something worthy of what it is. Are you certain you are ready to find out what you contain? She thought of Dax's compass. It points toward what you need most. She tightened her hand against the stone. Yes. Then the hollow took her. She didn't scream. She was proud of that later. She didn't scream once. Not when the transformation began. Not the bone-breaking shift she had envied in other wolves. Not the familiar agony of wolf emergence she had watched others endure with a strange jealousy her whole life. This was different. This was something the stories hadn't described because no one had come back able to describe it. It was like being unwritten. Like every word that had ever been used to define her. Wolfless, weak, not enough, broken, was being pulled out of her cell by cell, and in the space where those words had lived, something else was moving in. Something silver, something old, something that had not walked in the world in a very, very long time. 3 days later, the hollow was empty. The stone stood at the center of the ring. The silver flowers faced inward, and the woman who walked out of that place, east toward the tree line toward the world, was not the woman who had walked in. Her hair had changed first, then her eyes, then everything else. She crossed the dark river without using the stepping stones. She walked on the surface of it. She didn't notice she was doing it until she was on the other side. She stopped, looked back at the water, looked down at her feet. Then she laughed. It came out with that double resonance, that voice under voice, and even she found it slightly alarming. Then she stopped laughing. She reached up and touched her silver hair. She thought about Iron Veil. She thought about Kale standing in that clearing with his jaw set, and his hands steady, and his voice full of absolute certainty that she was nothing. She thought about the way the pack had laughed. The compass was still in her pocket. She pulled it out. The needle swung once, pointed west, toward Iron Veil. She put it away. She started walking. She had a lot of time to think on the walk back. About what she was. About what she was about to do. About whether what she wanted, what she'd asked the hollow for, was justice or revenge, and whether that distinction mattered. She didn't reach a clean answer. But she knew one thing with perfect clarity. She was going back. Not because Kale deserved to see what she'd become. Not even because the pack deserved her return. She was going back because she had been erased from that place. And no one gets to erase you. You walk back in. You remind them you exist. You make it impossible to forget. She had been walking for 3 days when she smelled them. Iron Veil wolves on patrol. Young ones, not the seniors. She heard one of them stop. Then a sound she hadn't expected. A low, involuntary whimper. The sound a wolf makes when it encounters something above its category. She stopped walking. She turned her head. Through the trees, 50 yards off, 2 young pack wolves stood frozen in their shifted forms, large, gray, well-trained. These were soldiers. They shouldn't be afraid of anything this close to home. They were trembling. She held their gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she continued walking. Behind her, she heard them shift back to human, the wet snap of reforming bone. And then barely audible. What was that? She let herself smile. Just a little. I'm going to need a bigger smile before this is over. She was 6 miles from Iron Veil, and word was going to reach the pack before she did. Will she arrive to a pack already terrified, or one that's convinced itself those boys saw shadows? And what will Kale do with the warning? What will he do when warning isn't enough? Chapter 4. His name was Brennan Cole, 19 years old, 3rd-year patrol wolf. Proud of his rank in the way only young men with something to prove can be proud. Loudly, constantly, wearing it like armor. He burst through the eastern gate of Iron Veil at a dead sprint, still half-shifted, fur receding along his forearms as he ran. And he went straight to Alpha Kale Draven's lodge without stopping, without knocking, without any of the protocol he'd been drilled on since he was 14. He just opened the door and stood there, breathing like he'd run from something. Cale looked up from the map table. Seraphine Voss sat across from him. They'd been reviewing the Northern Border Patrol routes, heads close together, the easy intimacy of two people who had recently decided they were inevitable. She frowned at the interruption. Cale's eyes went straight to Brennan's hands. Still trembling. Brennan wasn't the trembling type. "Talk," Cale said. Brennan opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "I need you to know," he started, voice tighter than his age, "that I am not afraid of things. I know that. I need you to know that before I say this. Brennan, there's something coming." Cale set down the compass he'd been holding. An old one, not used for navigation, just a habit he'd developed recently, turning it in his fingers when he was thinking. He wasn't sure when that started. "What kind of something?" I can't." Brennan exhaled hard. "It's a person. A woman. She's on the eastern approach, 6 miles out, and he stopped. Ren shifted when he smelled her. His wolf just took over. "I've never seen that." He didn't choose to shift, his wolf just. "What did she smell like?" Seraphine's voice was sharp, analytical, her beta daughter instincts engaging before her fear could. Brennan looked at her. His jaw worked. "I don't know how to describe it," he said finally. "Clean. Cold. He shook his head. Like before thunder. Like the second before something big hits. And underneath that." He stopped. "Underneath that, she smelled like." He couldn't finish the sentence. Cale stood. "Like what?" Brennan looked at him with an expression Cale couldn't immediately read. Then he recognized it. It was the look of someone about to say something that sounds insane. "Like your mate Bond," Brennan said quietly. "Like the ghost of it. Like something that used to be that, and became something else." The room went very still. Seraphine's chair legs scraped the floor as she stood. "That's not," she started. But Cale was already moving toward the door. He told himself it wasn't her. On the walk from his lodge to the eastern wall, he told himself a dozen reasonable things. Rogue wolves sometimes carried unusual scents. The Ashfall borderlands had been producing strange reports for months. Disturbances in the wild packs, animals behaving oddly, something in the east that the senior trackers couldn't identify. It was probably that. It wasn't her. She'd been gone 6 months. Wolfless humans, people without pack, without shift, without the ability to defend themselves in the deep forest. They didn't survive 6 months past the border. They certainly didn't walk through the eastern wilds with enough presence to make trained patrol wolves tremble. She'd gone east. East. He knew about the hollow. Every pack wolf did, in the way children know about wolves under beds. As story, as warning, as a place that existed at the edge of maps and the edge of belief. No one came back from the hollow like that. By the time he reached the eastern wall, half the pack had assembled. Word traveled in Iron Vale the way it always did. Mouth to ear, wolf to wolf, the pack mind stirring before the individual wolves had even made their choices. He could feel it in the collective energy, the nervousness, the way even the senior wolves had come out of their lodges and positioned themselves with a particular quality of attention that was less curiosity and more readiness. They were ready. They weren't sure for what. Elder Cora found him at the wall's base, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders, which was unusual. She looked like she'd come directly from her bed, but her eyes were fully alert, focused outward east. "You feel it?" she asked without preamble. "Feel what?" She looked at him sideways. "Don't." He exhaled. "Yes, I feel it. Something on the air, not quite scent, not quite sound, but present in the way a change in weather is present before any evidence arrives. The air getting sharper, cooler. The pack instinct in him, the part that was always alpha, even when he was trying to be ordinary, identified it immediately. Something apex is approaching. Something that ranked above the structure he commanded. His wolf had been pacing since Brennan burst through the door. It wasn't pacing out of fear. His wolf was pacing the way it did when it encountered something. Someone it had a complicated, unresolved, cellular-level reaction to. He already knew. He'd known since Brennan said "ghost of your mate Bond." He'd known, and he was choosing, right up until the last second, the comfort of not being sure. Then the eastern tree line rustled, and she stepped out. The clearing went silent. Not gradually. All at once. He had never heard 200 wolves go silent all at once before. Even at formal pack ceremonies there were shuffles, murmurs, the organic noise of people. This was different. This was the silence of every instinct overriding every choice simultaneously. He saw her hair first. Silver. Not gray. Not bleached. Silver. Pure metallic silver, catching the afternoon light the way a blade catches it, luminous and sharp. Then he saw her face. His chest did something complicated. It was Alara. It was undeniably, unmistakably Alara. The shape of her jaw, the particular set of her shoulders that he'd spent 7 years watching across rooms and training fields, the way she moved with that deliberate, unhurried quality that she'd always had, that the pack had always read as resignation, and he had always secretly read as something else entirely. But it was also someone else, or something more. She moved differently, not like she'd learned new techniques, like the fundamental relationship between her body and the ground had changed. Like gravity was applying to her as a courtesy rather than a rule. Her eyes, as she got closer, as the distance between them collapsed from 50 feet to 30 to 20, her eyes were wrong. Not wrong like damaged. Wrong like deep. Silver white, but not blank. Full. The way deep water is full. Full of everything that's never reached the surface. She stopped 10 feet away, and she looked at him. Really looked at him. The way she never had before. Or maybe the way she always had. But now there was nothing in her gaze that softened it. No hope, no longing, no desperate need for him to see her differently than he had. Just clear assessment, like he was something she was deciding about. Hello, Kale. Her voice. There was something underneath it. A resonance. Like she was two people speaking in unison, except the second, one didn't have a voice he could hear. Just a frequency he could feel behind his sternum. His wolf surged. He locked it down. Alara, he said. His voice came out steadier than it had any right to. She tilted her head, that slight, curious angle he recognized, and something moved through her silver eyes that might have been amusement. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. She let the silence stretch. He felt every wolf in the clearing holding their breath. He felt Seraphine, 8 feet to his left, absolutely rigid. He felt Elder Cora behind him, very still, very focused, in the way of someone watching something historic unfold. He kept his eyes on Alara. What happened to you? He asked. It came out quieter than he'd intended. She heard it. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that underneath the alpha voice was a person who was genuinely, helplessly asking. I went east, she said simply. The hollow. Yes. No one comes back from. I know. Her head tilted back to center. And yet, the silence held for another beat. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, the same somewhere that had laughed 6 months ago, a voice. Young. Male. Trying to sound brave. She's just a rogue. She doesn't have pack rights. She shouldn't be. Quiet. His voice. The alpha command landed before he'd fully decided to use it. The voice stopped. He wasn't sure why he'd shut it down. He would think about that later. Alara glanced briefly toward the voice. Then back at him. I'm not here to claim rights, she said. Calm. Almost conversational. Then why are you here? She looked at him. Her silver eyes were very steady. I'm here, she said, because 6 months ago, you stood in this clearing and told 243 wolves that I was nothing. A breath. I want them to see that you were wrong. Not. I want you to take it back. Not. I want an apology. Not. I want you back. I want them to see you were wrong. It landed in him differently than he expected. It landed like a challenge and a door closing simultaneously. Before he could respond, before any of the dozen things running through his head could become words, Elder Cora stepped forward. Child, she said softly. That word. Alara turned to look at her. Cora's expression was complex. The expression of a woman who had lived long enough to recognize something singular when she was standing in front of it. What did the hollow make you? Cora asked. Alara considered the question. She answered it with the slight upturn of her mouth that technically resembled a smile. That, she said, is the right question. And she left it there, unanswered, hanging in the air above all of them. What did the hollow make her? What was she exactly? And why, Kale realized with a cold, specific clarity. Why was his wolf not afraid? Every wolf in the clearing was afraid. Every trained, experienced, powerful wolf in Iron Veil pack was radiating low-level fear in the way wolves do, subtle, involuntary, biological. His wolf was not. His wolf was doing something he hadn't felt from it in years. It was straining forward, like it recognized something, like it was trying to get closer. Why? Chapter 5. Elder Cora gave her a room. Not a lodge. Not a guest suite. A room, small, stone-walled, in the southeast corner of the elder's quarters, with a window that faced the mountain. The same mountain she'd loved her whole life. She stood at that window for a long time after Cora left her. Not thinking about Cale's face. Definitely thinking about Cale's face. She turned away from the window. She had expected fear from the pack. She had expected the silence. She had not expected, could not have predicted, the moment that had almost undone her. Cale's voice. What happened to you? Not get out. Not, you have no rights here. Not, the cold, formal alpha command she had prepared herself for and built every defense against. Just what happened to you? Quiet. Almost raw. Like whoever had asked that question was not the alpha of Ironvale Pack. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her fingers against her sternum, where the mate bond used to burn. It didn't burn anymore. It was there, she could feel it, the echo of it, like scar tissue over the place a wound had been. The bond hadn't reformed, but something in her recognized something in him across molecular lines. The way your body remembers a language you were raised in even after years of not speaking it. She was not here for that. She reminded herself with careful firmness. She was not here for that. She came out at dusk. Not because she was summoned. Because hiding in a room was not what she'd come back to do. The pack common area. The wide, firelit space between the lodges where wolves gathered for meals, for news, for the ordinary business of pack life, went partially quiet when she appeared. Not the total silence of the clearing. Smaller, subtler. People mid-conversation pausing. Eyes tracking to her and then away, not wanting to be caught staring, wanting very much to stare. She walked to the fire. She helped herself to food from the communal table. The way she always had, the way she'd done 1,000 times before they stripped her membership, and she sat down on one of the wide log benches. And she waited. It didn't take long. Dax found her first. He came at speed. Not running, but the particular energized walk of someone who got news and made a decision and has been executing that decision since. And he dropped down onto the bench beside her with no preamble, no hesitation, and he wrapped both arms around her in a hug that was more tackle than embrace. She let herself lean into it. Just for a second. Just a second. You absolute nightmare, he said into her shoulder. I prefer to think of myself as a cautionary tale. He pulled back, held her at arm's length. His hazel eyes swept over her. The silver hair, the new quality of her eyes, the slightly too still way she was holding herself that had nothing to do with tension and everything to do with the fact that she was still getting used to the weight of what she was carrying. You came back, he said. I came back. Are you? Yes. I was going to ask if you were. I know what you were going to ask. Yes. She met his eyes. I'm okay, Dax. He studied her for another moment. Then slowly he nodded. And she saw the exact moment he chose to trust that, even though he had follow-up questions, she could see him physically restraining himself from asking. She loved him for that. The whole pack is talking, he said instead, dropping his voice to normal conversation level. I imagine. Half of them are saying you made a deal with something. Something bad. Half of them aren't wrong. He blinked. That's not the response I was hoping for. Would you like me to lie? I would like you to elaborate. She pulled apart a piece of bread, the way she always did, from the center, leaving the crust, and she thought about how much to say. What I made a deal with, she said carefully, was not evil. It was old. There's a difference. Evil wants to consume. Old things just remember. They hold things that were lost. And it gave you. Me, she said. It gave me me. She paused. More specifically, it gave me what was already in me. The part that was always supposed to be there. She glanced at him. Does that make sense? Terrifyingly little. That tracks. From across the fire, she felt a gaze on her. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She knew that gaze the way you know a sound you've been hearing for years. By frequency, by weight, by the particular quality of its attention. Cale was watching her. She ate her bread. She let him watch. Seraphine Voss came to find her after dinner. Alara had been expecting this too. She was sitting on the outer fence of the eastern training field. Sitting on top of the fence post the way she'd done since childhood, balance effortless, looking out at the dark tree line. When she heard footsteps with that distinctive Voss cadence. Long stride. Deliberate heel strike. the walk of someone who had never in their life been unsure of their welcome anywhere. She stopped beside the fence without sitting. She was beautiful. Alara had always acknowledged that with the simple, complicated honesty of someone who had spent years measuring themselves against a standard they couldn't meet. Seraphine Voss was tall, dark-haired, built like she was designed for both grace and combat, with amber eyes that were sharp in the way of someone who collected information and held it carefully. She looked at Alara now with those sharp amber eyes, and Alara looked back. For a moment, neither spoke. "I'm not afraid of you," Seraphine said. "I know," Alara said. "Most of them are. I know that too." Another silence. Seraphine's jaw shifted slightly. "What do you want?" she asked. "Being direct. You were always direct before. I respected that about you. So, what do you want? Why are you here?" Alara considered her. Not with hostility. With genuine curiosity, actually, about what this woman was, about whether she was someone who had known about the mate bond and pursued Kale anyway, someone who had been kept in the dark, or something more complicated than either of those things. "I want the pack to know I exist," Alara said. "I want what was taken from my name to be returned to it. Your name never. My name has been synonymous with failure in this pack for 10 years, Alara said mildly. "I'd like it to mean something else now." Seraphine was quiet. "That's all," she said finally. "That's not small." "No." She conceded that with a slight tilt of her head. "No, it isn't." She looked out at the tree line. Then, with the particular care of someone choosing words very precisely. "He hasn't slept." Alara said nothing. "Since your arrival. He's been in the Elder's library. Not his office, the library, where the old texts are kept." She paused. "I think he's trying to understand what you are. That's between him and the books." "Is it?" Alara met her gaze. Seraphine's amber eyes held something complicated. Not quite jealousy, not quite fear. Something that lived in the territory between them. The territory of someone who had built something she was now watching become uncertain. "He chose you," Alara said quietly. "Whatever is between you, he chose it. I'm not here to undo that. People don't come back from the hollow to stand on fences and eat bread." Alara almost smiled. "No," she agreed. "But the thing I came back for doesn't require him." That was true. She believed it completely. She just wasn't sure it was the whole truth. Seraphine looked at her for one more long moment. Then she walked away. Alara looked back at the tree line. Somewhere behind her, in the Elder's library, a lamp burned late. She didn't think about that. She absolutely thought about that. She was climbing down from the fence when he appeared. Not from the lodge direction. From the training field. From the darkness behind her, which meant he'd come around, which meant he'd been out there for a while. Watching her. Talking to Seraphine. How much had he heard? She turned to face him. He was in casual clothes, packed training grays, not the structured alpha where he used for formal occasions. His dark hair was slightly disordered. He looked like he hadn't slept, the way Seraphine had said. Shadows under his eyes, a quality of effort in the way he was holding himself upright that his normal precision usually concealed. He stopped 6 feet away. He looked at her like she was a problem he was trying to solve by looking hard enough. "You've been in the library," she said. Something moved through his expression. "Cora tell you?" "Seraphine." His jaw tightened slightly. "And what did the books tell you?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "They don't have a name for what you are." "No, there are references. Stories that are older than pack language." He watched her carefully. "A silver woman. Someone who went into the hollow and came out as, the books call it a pale sovereign." She blinked. She hadn't known that name. The hollow hadn't given her names. It had given her transformation. "Supposedly," Kale continued, "the last pale sovereign lived 300 years ago, before the current pack structures, before alpha hierarchies as we know them." A pause. "The records say that wolves with active mate bonds to a pale sovereign become." He stopped. "What?" she asked. He looked at her. Something in his golden eyes had shifted. Not fear. Not the alpha flatness she'd come to associate with his public face. Something that looked terrifyingly like. "Kale," she said more sharply. "What do the records say?" His voice, when it came, was very quiet. "Bound," he said. "They become bound. Not the way mates are bonded. Not the equal pull of it. More like," he paused again, choosing words carefully, "more like the bond becomes a tether, one-directional, and the wolf on the alpha's end of it." He stopped. She waited. The silence was enormous. Is yours, he finished. Entirely, involuntarily, and permanently yours. The night held that for a moment. She felt the old scar tissue place in her chest, do something she hadn't given it permission to do. That's not why I came back, she said. I know. I don't want a tethered mate. I don't want any of that. I know. Then why are you telling me? He looked at her with those sleepless eyes, and underneath the alpha and the stone facade, and everything he used to manage the world's impression of him, she saw something she hadn't seen since they were teenagers. The boy who had touched her hair, who had felt something, who had spent 7 years choosing his pack's standards over what he felt, and had talked himself into believing that was wisdom instead of cowardice. Because, he said, I think you deserve to know what I'm dealing with. She stared at him. You rejected me, she said. Yes. In front of 243 people. Yes. And had me expelled. Yes. His voice didn't waver on any of it. He didn't defend it. He just confirmed it. Like he was taking inventory. Like he was counting the full cost of something. She didn't know what to do with that. She had prepared for denial. For rationalization. For alpha ego defending alpha choices. She had not prepared for someone simply standing in the accounting of what they'd done. Get some sleep, she said finally. She walked past him. Her shoulder came within 3 inches of his arm. She felt the remnant bond stir in her chest. That cellular level recognition, that ghost of warmth. And she walked through it without stopping. She made it to the elders' quarters. She closed the door. She stood with her back against it in the dark. Her hand pressed flat over her sternum. Don't, she told herself. Don't. But something ancient and silver and not quite her yet more than her, was warming in her chest. And it wasn't listening. Chapter 6. Morning brought the wolves who needed to know. She'd expected this too. Every pack has them. The ones who need to verify the hierarchy personally. Who cannot operate on second-hand information. Who have to test for themselves where a new element fits in the structure. In Ironvale, those wolves were organized, predictable, and led, right now, by a man named Gregor Vane. Gregor was 31 years old. Beta rank, 3rd in command. Built like a door, wide, solid, the kind of physical presence that had probably done a great deal of his social work for him his entire life. He had sandy hair and pale blue eyes that were smart in the flat, tactical way of someone who thought primarily in terms of advantage. He found her on the training field at sunrise. She'd been there since before dawn, not because she needed to practice, but because she was still cataloging herself, learning what she could do, where the new limits and capacities were. The hollow had given her something extraordinary. She was still finding the edges of it. She'd been standing in the center of the training field, absolutely still, with her eyes closed, listening, to the pack, to the land, to the low bass hum of the ley lines under Ironvale territory that she could now feel like a second heartbeat. When she heard him coming, she didn't open her eyes. She let him come. He stopped 10 feet away. Ilara Vale. Gregor Vane. She opened her eyes. He looked her over with the frank assessment of someone ranking a threat. His pale eyes moved from her silver hair to her steady gaze to her hands. Stopped on her hands. She watched him register the faint luminescence under her skin. Not visible in daylight unless you were looking, but visible. You understand, he said carefully. That pack membership isn't a right you can just walk back into. I haven't asked for membership. You're eating our food. Sleeping in our elders' quarters. Cora offered. Cora doesn't set pack law. She looked at him evenly. What do you want, Gregor? He crossed his arms. I want to know what you are, he said. And I want to know if you're a threat to this pack. And, he held her gaze steadily, I want to know why the alpha isn't asking those questions himself. Fair points, honestly. She could appreciate that. I'm a pale sovereign, she said. If you found the library books Kale was reading last night, you can look it up. If you haven't, she let a small pause land, I'd suggest you do before you decide whether you want to continue this conversation. Something moved in his eyes. Not fear exactly. Recalculation. Pale sovereigns, he said slowly. If the texts are accurate, they're mostly accurate. Rank above alpha structure. She said nothing, which was itself an answer. He uncrossed his arms. He took a slow breath. He was smart enough to be dangerous, but smart enough, also, to recognize certain categories of futility. If you're not here to claim membership, he said carefully, what are you here to do? I told your alpha last night. I'm here so the pack sees that it was wrong about me. That's it. That's significant. And then what? You'll leave. She tilted her head. Ask me again when I'm done. He studied her for another moment. Then he nodded. Once. The nod of someone who has internally filed something under deal with later and made peace with it for now. He turned to go. Gregor. He stopped. The patrol patterns on the northern ridge. You've been running them on a 12-hour rotation. He turned back slowly. Wary. I know, she said. You changed them from 8-hour last month. I understand why. The senior wolves are stretched thin. But there's something moving in the north, in the old-growth section past the ridge. It's been there for about 3 weeks. She had smelled it on the patrol wolves last night. That secondary scent information that was now available to her in ways it hadn't been before. Something from the Ashfall boundary, she continued. Not a rogue wolf. Something older. It's been watching. Gregor was very still. How do you know? Because I can smell it on your patrol wolves from 30 meters away. She paused. And because the ley lines under your northern ridge have been disturbed. He stared at her. You might want to change the rotation back, she said mildly. And send someone senior. She turned away from him. Behind her, she heard him stand there for a long moment. Then his footsteps, walking quickly back toward the lodges. Not away from her. Toward the Alpha's lodge. She let herself breathe. They gathered at midday. She hadn't called them together. The pack gathered itself, the organic, instinctive motion of a group that needed to look at something and decide what it meant. She was at the fire again. Not performing. Not preparing. Just sitting with a cup of tea that Cora had pressed into her hands that morning and that she'd been drinking slowly, thoughtfully. The way you drink something when you're centering yourself. They assembled at the edges of the common area. All ages. All ranks. The children, whom no one had thought to send away, peered from behind adults. The elders positioned at the edges with careful, attentive stillness. The younger wolves up front. The bravest always go first, with that particular volatile mix of bravado and nerves. Cale stood at the back. She felt him there. She didn't look. It was Elder Cora who spoke first. People of Iron Vale. Her voice, old dry, carrying a lifetime of authority in every syllable, silenced the murmurs immediately. You've all spent the last 15 hours speculating. I'd prefer we did less of that and more of something useful. She looked at Alara. Alara Vale has returned to Iron Vale. She has not asked for membership. She has not made demands. She has offered information about a potential northern threat. A ripple of attention moved through the crowd at that, which Gregor is currently investigating. She paused. She is here as a guest of the Elder Council. She will be treated with the courtesy we extend to any person under our roof. A silence. Then, from somewhere near the middle of the crowd, not young, not the impulsive bravado of youth, a wolf named Marcus Fenn. Mid-40s. One of the most respected trainers in the pack. The kind of person whose opinion moved others. Elder Cora, Marcus said, his voice measured. With respect, this is a supernatural entity of unknown origin and alignment. Courtesy seems. She is a person, Cora said. She walked on the dark river, someone else said. Brennan said she looked at him and ran. His wolf went submissive. The voices overlapping now, that particular quality of crowd sound, where individual threads braid into something louder. Alara set down her tea. She stood up. The voices stopped. Not because she commanded them to. Because when she stood, when she turned toward them and was fully, completely present, the air changed. That was the only way to describe it. The air in the clearing shifted slightly, like something large and very calm had just directed its full attention to the room, and every instinct in every wolf responded to it automatically. She let them look. She let them feel it. She gave them time. Then she spoke. I know what you see when you look at me. Her voice, with its undertone resonance, carried without effort to every corner of the space. You see something strange. Something that doesn't fit your categories. She looked around the crowd. Slow. Steady. Meeting eyes. I was born in this pack. I was trained in this pack. I spent 23 years trying to prove my value by every measure this pack provided, and failing by every measure you used. She paused. Not because I was weak, because the measuring tools were wrong. She turned slightly, her gaze moving to the back of the crowd where she knew, without looking directly, that Cale stood. What I am now, she said, was always in me. The hollow didn't give me something foreign. It gave me back something your measuring tools couldn't see. The silence had that quality again, the held breath quality. "I'm not asking for your acceptance," she said. "I'm not asking to be alpha female. I'm not asking for anything that was taken from me." She paused. "Let that land. I'm simply standing here, as what I actually am, and I am inviting you to adjust your measurements." Quiet. Then Marcus Fenn measured, respected Marcus Fenn, took a slow breath, and bowed his head, just slightly. The bow of acknowledgement, not of submission. The thing you give to something you have decided to respect. It moved through the crowd like a wave. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough that she felt it land. She sat back down. She picked up her tea. She took a sip, and in the very back of the crowd, in the space where Cale stood watching, she heard, barely, at the edge of even her enhanced hearing, a breath that sounded like someone releasing something they'd been holding for a very long time. She found out about the northern threat that same afternoon. Gregor came to find her. He looked like a man who had swallowed something surprising and was deciding how to feel about the digestion. "You were right," he said. "About which part?" "The northern ridge. Senior Tracker took a drone team up 3 hours ago." He paused. "Found tracks. Not wolf tracks. Not any tracks in our reference catalog." He was being very careful, very precise. Like if he said it correctly, it might make more sense. "Something bipedal. Very large. Moving along our northern boundary in a consistent pattern for 3 weeks, she said. "Yes." She nodded. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I need to go to the ridge." He blinked. "You need to. I can read it better in person." She stood. "Tell Cale." A pause. "He'll want to come," Gregor said. She thought about that. About Cale in the northern dark forest beside her. About the tether he'd mentioned. About the way his wolf had been straining toward her in the clearing. "Tell him he can come," she said. She walked out of the common area. She didn't look behind her. She knew he'd be there. She was already deciding how to feel about that. The northern ridge. A threat older than pack structures. And Cale Draven, walking into the dark beside the woman he destroyed. But here's what no one in Ironvale knew yet. Alara had felt the presence on the ridge before the patrol wolves had. She'd felt it since the moment she crossed back into Ironvale territory. She'd been waiting to see if it would come to her, or if she'd need to go to it. And more critically, she recognized what it was. Because the Hollow had told her, right before she left, in that final moment of instruction, of warning, of whatever the ancient presence had given her that she hadn't shared with anyone. It had said, "You will not be alone in what you are. There is another, and it is not patient." Chapter 7. The northern ridge at night smelled like the end of something. Alara noticed it before they cleared the second tree line. That particular composition of scents she was still learning to read with her new precision. Cold soil and old bark, the clean mineral smell of granite underfoot, the faint chemical signature of pack boundary markers weathering at the edges. And underneath all of it, threaded through the forest like a dark ribbon, something that didn't belong, something that smelled like the Hollow. She stopped walking. Behind her, 4 feet back, because he'd been maintaining exactly 4 feet since they left the southern gate, as though he'd calculated the distance that was respectful without being pointed. Cale stopped too. The 2 senior trackers flanking them stopped. Gregor, bringing up the rear, stopped. "You smell it," Cale said. Not a question. "Yes." "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. She was reading it, pulling it apart layer by layer the way her new senses allowed her to, identifying components the way you identify notes in something complex. What's on top? What's underneath? What's at the foundation that everything else is built on? On top, old forest. Rain-wet stone. Underneath, something biological she didn't have a name for. Large. Patient. The scent signature of something that had been waiting so long that waiting had become its primary state of being. At the foundation, silver. The same molecular signature as the Hollow's flowers. The same register as the transformation she carried. Her throat tightened. "You will not be alone in what you are. There is another." "It's not hostile," she said carefully. "Not hostile," Gregor repeated, with the tone of someone who finds that distinction deeply insufficient. "Not yet," she amended honestly. She started walking again. The ridge was another half-mile up. Steep, pine-choked, the kind of terrain that punished the inattentive. She moved through it without hesitation, her footing certain in the dark in a way that had nothing to do with memorized paths, and everything to do with the fact that the land spoke to her now in a register she could read. She felt Kale's attention on her back the entire climb. Not the flat watchfulness of an alpha monitoring a variable. Something more personal, more helpless. She filed that away. The tracks were at the ridge line, in the soft earth of the windbreak where pine needles gave way to exposed mountain soil. She crouched beside them. Bipedal. Gregor had been right about that. But large. The stride was almost 5 feet, the depth of the impression suggesting mass. Each footprint was roughly twice the length of a human foot, the toe pattern distinct in a way that was almost human but not quite. At the edges of each print, in the disturbed soil, a faint silver luminescence, almost invisible. She ran her finger along the edge of the nearest print. The luminescence traveled up her skin like recognition. The same cellular-level response she'd felt when she touched the hollow stone, except quieter. Like an echo of something rather than the thing itself. Ilara. Kale's voice low. He'd crouched beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him through the cold mountain air. What is that light? Information, she said. That's not an answer. It's the most accurate answer I have right now. She straightened. She looked north, up past the ridge line, into the dark old growth that stretched toward the ashfall border. She could feel it up there, the other presence, like a mirror held at a distance, reflecting something she recognized, but from an angle that made recognition incomplete. Not dangerous. Not exactly. But enormous. And it knew she was here. She felt the moment it registered her. A shift in the direction of that far-off attention, of focusing, like a camera finding its subject. I need to go up alone, she said. Every wolf behind her went rigid. Absolutely not, Kale said. She turned to look at him. He was 2 feet from her, face illuminated by the thin moonlight, and his golden eyes had that quality. The focused, strained quality she'd been noticing since her return, of something being held under pressure. You can't come, she said. Not unkindly. What's up there will respond to me. It won't respond well to a pack alpha. I'm not sending you into. You're not sending me anywhere, she said very quietly. He stopped. She watched him absorb that. The reminder, gentle but unambiguous, that the authority structure between them had changed. That the person he was speaking to was not the wolfless woman he had expelled with a word. His jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. Stay here, she said. I'll be back before dawn. She started up the ridge. Ilara. She stopped. She didn't turn. She heard him take a breath. Be careful. 2 words. Just 2. She walked forward. The old growth above the ridge was cathedral dark. Ancient pines so tall their canopies disappeared above her. Their trunks wide as cars. The forest floor beneath them almost clear of undergrowth, carpeted instead in decades of accumulated needles that silenced every footfall. She walked for 10 minutes. Then she stopped, because it was standing in front of her. The word for what it was came to her immediately, from the hollow's final instruction, from whatever ancient knowledge had been transferred in that 3-day transformation. Warden. The old word. The original word for what guardians had been, before packs, before alpha hierarchies, before the current era of wolf kind had organized itself into its present shape. It stood 8 feet tall, roughly humanoid, but only roughly. The proportion of limb to torso was slightly wrong, the shoulders broader than architecture seemed to allow, the neck carrying the head in a way that suggested the skull was heavier than expected. Its skin, if skin was the right word, was the gray silver of granite in moonlight. Its eyes were the same silver white as hers had become. It looked at her the way she might look at her own reflection after a long time away from mirrors. With recognition, with relief, with something that, in a human face, she would have called finally. You are new, it said. Its voice was the way hers had become, doubled, layered, with that subfrequency resonance. But richer, deeper, more complete. The voice of something that had been speaking in this register for centuries rather than months. 6 months, she confirmed. The hollow. Yes. It was quiet for a moment. There have been no pale sovereigns in 300 years, it said. I know. The world has become very loud without you. It tilted its massive head. Something in the gesture was very old and very tired. The pack structures. The alpha lines. The fractures. It paused. The things that have been building along the borders while the packs fight among themselves. Her spine went cold. What things? She asked. It looked north. Past her. Past the trees. Past the distance, towards something she couldn't see. There is a convergence coming, it said. From the ashfall boundary. From beyond. Its silver eyes came back to her. The last convergence was what killed the sovereigns 300 years ago. They were unprepared. Isolated. One by one. She absorbed that. How long? She asked. Weeks, it said. Perhaps less. She breathed through the cold that was spreading through her chest. And you've been watching Ironvale because the convergence will come through this pack's territory, it said simply. And because I felt you arrive. It reached out. A massive hand, gentle despite its size, extended toward her. On its palm, a marking. The same kind she'd seen on the hollow stone. Not carved but grown. Glowing faintly. You are not ready, it said. Not fully. You have the transformation, but not the knowledge. Can you teach me? That is why I am here. She looked at the marking on its palm. Then she looked up at its ancient, patient face. What's coming? She said. Can Ironvale survive it? The warden considered this. That depends, it said carefully, on whether Ironvale's alpha chooses what he always should have chosen. She knew exactly what that meant. She was not ready to examine what that meant. Tell me what I need to know, she said. And the warden began. Chapter 8. She came down from the ridge 2 hours before dawn. Cale was exactly where she'd left him. Not pacing. Not resting. Just standing at the edge of the ridge line, facing north, absolutely still, in the way of someone who has made stillness into discipline because the alternative is something he cannot afford. The two trackers had retreated slightly, 20 feet back, close enough to respond, far enough to give whatever was about to happen its space. Gregor was gone. She'd expected that. He'd have gone back to run the information she'd given him about the northern boundary changes. She stopped beside Cale. She looked at his profile in the pre-dawn gray. He looked like he hadn't moved in 2 hours. Like the cold hadn't touched him. Like the wind that had picked up on the ridge hadn't existed for him. Like he had simply decided to remain in this place until she came back. And having made that decision had been entirely sufficient. She thought about what the warden had said. Whether Ironvale's alpha chooses what he always should have chosen. What did you find? He asked. His voice was rough at the edges. Not from cold. She turned to face him. A warden, she said. I don't know what. A guardian. Older than pack structures. Older than alpha bloodlines. One of the things that existed when what we are, wolves, pack animals, all of it, was younger and wilder and the world had a different shape. He turned to look at her. It's been watching your territory for 3 weeks, she said. Not because of me. Because of what's coming. She told him. All of it. The convergence from the ashfall boundary. The timeline. What it would mean for a pack territory in its path. The fact that it had destroyed the last pale sovereigns 300 years ago. Not because they were weak, but because they'd been alone and unprepared. She watched his face while she talked. She watched the alpha absorb information, the professional, tactical side of him cataloging threat data and running assessments. But she also watched the other things moving underneath that. Fear, genuine fear, the kind that belongs to someone who is responsible for 243 lives and has just received news that those lives are in danger. When she finished, he was quiet. How long do we have to prepare? He asked. The warden says weeks. Possibly less. What do we need? Unity, she said. Pack unity specifically. The old packs that survived convergences survived them because they were bound. Not just structurally but deeply. The kind of binding that comes from genuine loyalty, not hierarchy. She paused. Your pack has hierarchy. But there are fractures in it. He was quiet. He knew the fractures she meant. And you, he said. What do you need? To do whatever it is a pale sovereign does in this situation. She looked at him. This was the part she'd been thinking about on the walk down. The part the warden had been specific about. I need the rejection undone, she said. Silence. The wind moved through the pines. Not, she said carefully, because I need the bond. Not because I want. She stopped. Started again. When you rejected me publicly in front of the pack, you broke something that wasn't just personal. The mate bond between a sovereign and an alpha is. She searched for the right word. Structural. Like a load-bearing element. When it's severed, it creates a weakness in the pack's collective. A place where the binding doesn't hold. She watched him process that. You're saying. I'm saying the fracture in your pack's unity that I felt the moment I crossed back into your territory. The gap in the collective binding. Is, at least in part, because of what you did to the bond. His jaw worked. And to repair it, you need to undo it, she said. Publicly. With the same weight you gave it when you enacted it. He was very still. Ilara, I know what I'm asking, she said quietly. I know what that means for you and Seraphine. I know what it means for your standing. I know the pack will. I don't care about that. The words came out fast. Too fast. She blinked. He looked surprised at himself. Like something he'd been restraining had moved faster than his control. He turned away from her. One hand pressed against the nearest pine trunk, his back to her. His shoulders tense with the effort of whatever he was managing. I've known, he said very quietly. She waited. Since the day I did it. I've known. He kept his back to her. I told myself I was protecting the pack. The pack needs a strong alpha female. The pack can't have a wolfless woman at its head. Pack law, he stopped. All of it was true. And all of it was also just cover. She said nothing. Cover for the fact that I was afraid, he said. The pine needles absorbed the words. Of what? She asked. He turned around. He looked at her with those sleepless, honest, golden eyes. Of you, he said. Of what I felt. Since we were 17 years old, I have never been able to look at you without my wolf screaming at me. And I couldn't control that. And control is, he exhaled. Control is the only thing an alpha has that's actually his. The wolf is instinct. The bond is chemistry. The pack is obligation. The only thing that's mine is choice. And what I felt for you never felt like a choice. It felt like something that had already been decided. The pre-dawn sky was beginning to pale at the edges. She could see him clearly now. She could see everything clearly now. With her new eyes, with the hollow's gift, with the strange doubled perception that let her see not just surface but a layer beneath. She saw a man who had spent 7 years being afraid of the one thing he couldn't choose. And had hurt her for it. She felt the anger. She didn't push it away. She let it be present, legitimate and real. That doesn't make it right, she said. No, he said immediately. No, it doesn't. There is no version of what I did that I can construct an argument for. I've stopped trying. She studied him. Seraphine, she said. He closed his eyes briefly. I know, he said. She didn't deserve that either. Whatever you were building with her wasn't what she deserved, he said. I know that too. I was building something with her that was reasonable, compatible, clean. He opened his eyes. She is extraordinary. She deserves someone who loves her the way she should be loved. He met Ilara's gaze. I wasn't giving her that. Ilara breathed. The anger was still there. But underneath it, that cellular, impossible, infuriating warmth that had nothing to do with what she decided and everything to do with what she was. If you undo the rejection, she said carefully, it doesn't mean you're reclaiming the bond. I know. It means acknowledging that it exists. It means the pack sees the fracture repaired. That's all. Is it? He asked. She didn't answer that. Because the honest answer was, I don't know. And she wasn't ready to say that out loud. I need to go talk to Seraphine, he said. Yes. Before I do anything publicly, she deserves to hear it from me. Yes. He held her gaze for one more moment. In it, she saw the weight of everything. The full cost of what he was about to do, the genuine grief of it, and underneath that, something so old and persistent and cellular that it had survived 7 years of active suppression without diminishing. He walked past her, down the ridge. She stood at the ridge line and watched him go, her hand pressed to her sternum. The scar tissue over the old wound pulsed once. Don't, she told herself. Not yet. He has to do this right first. He has to prove he's different from who he was. Words aren't enough. You need to see. You need to see if he's capable of choosing the hard thing over the comfortable thing. You need to see who he is when there's no advantage in it. Wait. She turned back north. The warden was gone from the ridge. But she could feel it, north, patient, waiting the way something waits when it has learned that waiting is not emptiness but preparation. She closed her eyes. She asked the silver thing inside her a question she hadn't been ready to ask before. Is he worth it? The silver thing, old, deep, not given to sentimentality, considered the question with the thorough, unhurried honesty of something that cannot be deceived. Its answer wasn't in words. It was in sensation. The warmth in her chest expanded slightly. Just slightly. Not yet a yes. But not a no either. An invitation to find out. She opened her eyes. She walked back down to her pack. Chapter 9. She heard them before she reached the lodges. Not an argument. Something quieter than an argument and worse. Kale's voice, low and even, the voice of someone choosing every word with painful care. Seraphine's voice, after a long silence, steady in the way that things are steady just before they break. Elara stopped outside the east gate. She wasn't going to listen. She started walking again, away from the sound, toward the elders' quarters, toward the room with the window that faced the mountain. She made it 3 steps. "I know." Seraphine's voice. 2 words. Elara stopped again. "I've known for a while." Seraphine's voice was controlled. That very particular brand of controlled that comes from being a warrior first and a person second, from training every emotion into something that can be managed and deployed. "I told myself it didn't matter, that what we were building was enough." A beat. "It wasn't enough," she said. "Was it?" Kale's silence answered. Elara walked away before she could hear anything else. She was in her room for 20 minutes when Seraphine knocked. She knew it was her. By the step, by the knock pattern, by the specific quality of silence right before the knock, like someone gathering themselves. "Come in," Elara said. Seraphine opened the door. She stepped inside. She stood with her back against the closed door, arms crossed. Not in hostility, in containment, and she looked at Elara with those sharp amber eyes. Her face was steady. Her eyes were very bright. "I'm not going to cry in front of you," she said. "I didn't think you would." "Good." A silence. "I'm not angry at you," Seraphine said. "I know. I should be. It would be easier. But," she exhaled, "you came back and you didn't try to reclaim him. You came back for you. I respected that." She paused. "I still respect it. Even now." Elara looked at her. "He's going to undo the rejection," Seraphine said. "Yes. Because of the pack. Because of what's coming. Yes. And because she stopped. Her jaw was very tight. Because he never stopped." Silence. "I'm sorry," Elara said. "Don't," Seraphine started, with a flash of something sharp. Then softened it. "Don't apologize for things that were already true before you walked back in." She pushed off the door. She walked to the window. She stood with her back to Elara, looking out at the mountain. "He's a good man," she said quietly. "He made one terrible choice and he has been punishing himself for it ever since, in that private, soundless way he has of carrying things." She paused. "I don't think he ever let himself feel the full weight of what he did to you. I think he had it categorized, locked down, because letting himself feel it would have meant knowing something about himself he didn't want to know." Elara said nothing. "He's feeling it now," Seraphine said. She turned. Her eyes were bright, but her face was stone. "Don't waste it," she said. "Whatever this is, whatever it becomes. Don't waste it by being afraid of it." It landed in Elara's chest like something precise. "I'm not afraid." "You are," Seraphine said. "Not unkindly. Just accurately. You came back for your name, for your dignity, for the pack to see who you are. And all of that is right and good." She paused. "But you also came back because some part of you needed to know if it was real. What you felt. Whether it was worth surviving what he did to you." Elara looked at her. She didn't have a defense against that. Because it was true. The whole truth she hadn't been ready to say out loud. "I hate that you can read people that clearly," Elara said finally. Seraphine's mouth curved. Not warmly, not yet. It was too fresh, the grief too recent. But with the very slight upturn of someone who, in different circumstances, would have been a friend. "Useful quality in a beta female," she said. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on it. "Elara." "Yeah. When the convergence comes," she turned back, and for the first time the controlled steadiness dropped completely, and what Elara saw underneath it was a warrior who was afraid for her pack. "We're going to need you. All of you. Whatever the hollow made you. Whatever the warden is teaching you." "I know," Elara said. "Don't hold back because of what we did to you." Elara held her gaze. "I won't," she said. And she meant it. Not for Kale. Not even for herself. For the 243 wolves who had been her pack even when they hadn't treated her like it. For Dax, who had pressed a compass into her hand and let her walk toward the hard thing. For all the children who had watched her from behind adult legs in the common area with curious, uncalculating eyes that didn't yet know how to measure someone as insufficient. For them. Seraphine nodded once. She left. The formal ceremony happened at dusk. Not because the pack had been officially called. Because somehow, the way pack mind works, that collective current of shared instinct, they simply knew. They assembled in the clearing. All of them. Even the children. Elara stood at the center. She hadn't been asked to stand there. She'd simply arrived and the crowd had parted for her, and she'd stood where the clearing's energy naturally placed her. At the convergence point, the place where pack events happened, where judgments were made and bonds were spoken and things became real. Cale stood 3 feet in front of her. He looked like he had been awake for 30 hours. He looked like he had made a decision that cost him something he wasn't going to describe, and had paid it and was still standing. He looked like himself. More himself, maybe, than she had ever seen him. He met her eyes. He turned to face the pack. 6 months ago, he said, and his alpha voice carried across the clearing with perfect clarity. I stood in this place and rejected my mate before the full pack. The silence was absolute. I told you she was wolfless, weak, unable to contribute. He paused. I told you that I was protecting this pack by removing her. Another pause. I was wrong. Nobody moved. I was wrong about what she was. I was wrong about the value of what she carried. And I was wrong to use this pack's judgment as cover for my own fear. He held the clearing. That is not leadership. That is cowardice wearing leadership's face. And you deserved better from me. From the edge of the crowd, quiet, private, Elara heard a sound that might have been Dax exhaling. Elara Vale. He turned back to face her. He looked at her, and in his golden eyes, no stone, no alpha flatness, just the full unguarded weight of someone choosing to be known. She saw everything. The 7 years. The boy at 17 who had touched her hair. The man who had dismantled her in front of everyone he commanded. The person he was becoming, right now, in this moment, by choice. I formally retract the rejection, he said. Before this pack. Before whatever witnesses exist beyond this clearing. Before whatever that means for what we are to each other going forward. His voice was very quiet for a moment, just for her, just private within the public act. Which is not something I will determine or claim without your consent. He held her gaze. I was wrong, he said simply. And I am sorry. The clearing held the words. Elara felt something move through the pack energy. Subtle, tectonic, the way a structural repair moves through a building when the load-bearing element is restored. A settling, a coherence where there had been a gap. She felt it in her chest, that old scar tissue place. Not burning, not the pain of the rejection. Something else, something warm, something that was starting very carefully to knit. She looked at him. For a long moment, she just looked. The whole clearing waited. I know, she said. Not, I forgive you. Not, I accept. I know, which meant, I see you saying it. I see you meaning it. I am holding the space where something might grow when I'm ready to let it. He breathed, like something had released in him. From the crowd, Marcus Fenn first, then others, spreading outward, a low, formal sound. Not applause. The pack acknowledgement. The collective vocal recognition that something has shifted and been witnessed and is now real. Dax, from the middle of the crowd, caught her eye. He looked like a man trying not to make an expression. He was absolutely making an expression. She almost smiled. She felt the pack binding close around her. Not fully, not the complete warmth of before when she had been a full member, but a beginning, a reconnection. The ley lines under the clearing hummed. She felt the warden, north of the ridge, feel it too. Good, it seemed to say. That is one thing repaired. Now we prepare for what's coming. She looked at the gathering dusk. At the treeline. At the north where something ancient and dangerous was building toward their territory. Weeks. Maybe less. Everything they had was not yet enough. But it was no longer broken. And in the difference between those two things, everything she needed to work with. She turned back to the pack. Iron Veil, she said. The resonance in her voice, that double register, ancient and present, moved through the clearing like a sound that had been waiting for its moment. Every wolf straightened. We have work to do. The pack was healing. The warden was waiting. The convergence was coming. But there was still one thing Elara hadn't told anyone. The last thing the Hollow had said to her before she left. The warning it had saved for the end. Because it was the kind of truth that breaks things if spoken too soon, but couldn't be carried alone forever. And the person it most needed to reach was standing 3 feet behind her, listening, hoping. Chapter 10. She told him at midnight. She'd been carrying it for 9 days. 9 days of preparation, of the warden descending from the northern ridge each night to teach her in the clearing behind the elders' quarters, of the pack drilling its combat formations under Gregor's relentless instruction, of Dax reorganizing the pack's youngest and oldest into a protected interior while the fighters trained their outer perimeter. 9 days of Kale working beside her. Not above her, not directing her, just present. Showing up each morning at the preparation meetings. Deferring on questions the warden had answered. Asking good questions about things he didn't know. 9 days of 4 feet of careful distance. Of his eyes finding her across rooms. Of her not acknowledging it. Of that warm, nascent, terrifyingly alive thing in her chest. The knitting of what had been torn. Growing in the specific, quiet way that things grow when nobody is forcing them. Tonight, the warden had been agitated. She'd felt it in the session. A new quality to its patient stillness. A tightening at the edges of its ancient composure. "It's closer than I calculated," it had said. The convergence accelerates when it enters packed territory. The boundary disruptions feed it. "How long?" she'd asked. "Days. Perhaps 2. She'd sat with that for an hour after it left. Then she'd gone to find Kale. He was in the training field. Alone. He wasn't drilling. He was just standing in the center of the field in the dark, the way she'd seen him stand at the ridge. That disciplined stillness, that contained quality. She crossed the field toward him. He heard her at 20 feet. Turned, shoulders releasing slightly the way they did when specifically she arrived. A micro-relaxation she was fairly sure he wasn't aware of. She stopped 2 feet from him. The 4 feet had been eroding by degrees. "It's in 2 days, she said. His jaw set. "The warden told you. Tonight." He looked at the tree line to the north. "We're not ready," he said. "No pack has ever been fully ready for a convergence. That's not comforting." "I know." She paused. "Kale." He looked at her. "There's something I haven't told you." His expression didn't shift. He just went very still in the way he had. That particular quality of attention he gave things that mattered. She looked at him. She thought about how to start. She started at the beginning. "When I left the hollow," she said, "in the final moment, when the ancient presence had finished with me and I was about to walk out, it gave me one last piece of information." She breathed. "It told me that the transformation it gave me was incomplete." Silence. "A pale sovereign's power doesn't fully mature alone," she said. "It requires," she stopped. "In the old records, in what the warden has been teaching me, a pale sovereign's full capacity is accessed through the mate bond. Through the specific, voluntary, chosen connection between a sovereign and their alpha." She held his gaze. Not the tether the old books describe. Not the involuntary binding. The real one. The chosen one. The silence between them was enormous. "When you rejected me," she said carefully, "you didn't just break the bond. You effectively sealed something in me. The part that was already growing. The part that needed the bond to reach its full form." He was very still. "So what I have now," she continued, "is significant. It's real. The warden has been helping me maximize it. But she searched for the word. "It's partial." "How partial?" he asked. His voice was very quiet. "I don't know exactly. The warden estimates that what I can access now is perhaps 60% of what I'm capable of." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, something moved through his face that she had not seen there before. Not fear. Not tactical calculation. Guilt. Real, deep, structural guilt. The kind that doesn't come from being caught, but from genuinely understanding the shape of what you caused. 60% might not be enough, he said. It might not. And the other 40 requires the bond. She held his gaze. Requires it to be chosen. Both directions. Freely. He looked at her. She looked back. "I need to be clear with you," she said. "I am not asking you to choose me for tactical reasons. I am not asking you to rebuild the bond as a strategy for surviving the convergence." Her voice was steady. "If the only reason you're willing to do this is to increase my power output before a battle." "It isn't." 2 words. Immediate. "Kale. Ilara." His voice dropped to something she'd never heard from him before. Not alpha, not controlled, nothing performed or managed. Just raw and real, and very tired of the weight it had been carrying. "I have been in love with you since I was 17 years old. The night held that. And I rejected you," he said. "And expelled you. And I let you walk away from everything you'd ever known with one bag on your back and nowhere to go. And I told myself it was necessary." He stopped. "And then you were gone. And the pack continued. And I built something with Seraphine that was good and genuine and unfair to her, because at the center of it, in the place where I was supposed to have chosen her, completely." He exhaled. There was still you. She said nothing. She trusted herself to say nothing. I know that isn't an excuse, he said. I know it doesn't erase what I did. I know you have every reason to take what I just said and decide it changes nothing. I haven't decided anything, she said. He looked at her. Yet, she added. Something in his eyes shifted. That faint, specific quality. Not hope exactly, too careful for hope, but the thing that lives right before hope when someone has stopped being afraid to want something. The convergence, she said. Let's survive that first. And after? She held his gaze for a long moment. That warm, silver, infuriatingly alive thing in her chest pulsed once. Ask me after, she said. She turned. She walked back toward the elder's quarters. She made it to the doorway. She stopped. She spoke without turning. For what it's worth, she said quietly, the hollow knew what it was doing, when it chose to give me back what I had. A breath. What it gave me remembers you. She went inside. Behind her, in the dark training field, she heard him breathe. Like something cracking open. Like someone letting themselves feel the full weight of something for the first time. In 2 days, everything would be tested. But tonight, at least, they had no more lies between them. Chapter 11. The convergence didn't announce itself. It arrived the way real danger always arrives. Not with the dramatics you've prepared for, but quietly, from a direction you almost didn't cover. She felt it at dawn on the second day. She was at the northern perimeter. She'd been there all night, the warden beside her, both of them watching the old growth with the specific attention of people who know the exact shape of what's coming, when the ley lines shifted. Not gradually. All at once. Like a fault line releasing. The ground didn't shake. But something under it did. Something that traveled up through the soles of her feet and into her bones and registered not as vibration, but as wrongness. The deep, specific wrongness of something breaking through a boundary it shouldn't be able to cross. The warden made a sound she hadn't heard from it before. Low, resonant. The sound of something ancient acknowledging something it had known was coming and still didn't want to be real. Now, it said. She was already moving. She hit the pack alert before her mind had fully formed the decision. The pale sovereign's version of it, which was not a sound but a pulse, a ripple through the ley lines she had learned to read and now learned to write, that traveled through Ironvale's territory like a shockwave and hit every wolf simultaneously. Every wolf in the pack woke up at once. She felt it, the sudden bloom of 243 consciousnesses snapping to alertness, the pack mind activating like a circuit completing. She felt Kale specific among them, the particular signature of him, gold and sharp and immediately directed north. Felt him feel her through whatever the remnant of their bond had become in these 9 days of careful proximity, and felt the surge of his wolf toward her position. Northern perimeter, she pushed through the ley lines. All fighters. Now, what came through the old growth was not a single thing. That was the first surprise. She had imagined, they had all imagined, something massive. One entity, a single convergence point, something that could be engaged and defeated. It was not that. It was a tide. Shadow forms. Dozens of them, maybe more, roughly wolf-shaped but not wolf, constructed from something that lived in the space between pack energy and its opposite, in the territory of things that fed on the binding rather than contributing to it. They moved together without being a pack. No hierarchy, no unity, just shared direction, shared hunger, a school of something terrible flowing through the trees. The warden stepped forward. It made that sound again, but louder now, deliberate, directed. The shadow forms at the front hesitated. Just for a second. Then kept coming. Kale reached her at a dead run, shifted mid-stride. The massive dark wolf she had watched from a distance her entire adult life, built like something inevitable, moving like controlled violence, and hit the first of the shadow forms at the perimeter line. Pack wolves flooded in behind him. The fight fractured into chaos immediately. That was the second surprise. Shadow forms weren't solid in the ordinary sense. Physical contact disrupted them, slowed them, but didn't destroy them. They moved through pack wolves like pressure, like something that got into the spaces between. She watched 2 fighters stagger. Not injured, not in the physical sense, but wrong. Dimmed. Like something had touched the center of their pack bond and pulled. She understood. They don't kill. She realized it in a flash of the warden's knowledge. They drain. They take the binding. That's what feeds them. Back, she called. Alpha command weighed in it, even though she held no alpha title. Every wolf in earshot responded anyway. Pull back from contact. Don't let them hold on. She stepped forward. The warden moved beside her. She reached down into herself, into the silver, ancient, enormous thing she'd been learning to access in careful degrees for 9 days. And she pushed. The silver light that came out of her was not subtle. It was not careful. It was not 60%. Because in that moment, with the pack behind her, with Kale's wolf fighting at the perimeter, with the full weight of what was at stake pressing on every choice, something in the bond space, the ghost of mate bond territory that had been knitting for 9 days, suddenly did what it had been building toward. It completed. Not because anyone said the words. Not because a ceremony was performed. Because she chose. And somewhere in the part of Kale that existed below choice, that cellular, molecular, wolf-deep place, he chose back. The bond snapped home like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting 300 years. The silver light tripled. She felt the gasp move through the pack. 243 wolves feeling the structural repair complete, the load-bearing element fully restored, the collective binding snapping into a coherence and strength it hadn't had for months. The warden made a sound that was not its warning sound. It was something else. Recognition. Pride. The full light of what Alara Vale contained poured into the clearing, into the perimeter, into every corner of Iron Vale's territory simultaneously. Not as heat, not as destruction, but as something that the shadow forms encountered and simply could not exist inside. The binding. Alive, complete, radiating outward from her center. They didn't flee. They dissolved. The ones at the front first, touching the light and simply ceasing to be the thing they were, the energy dispersing, harmless, into the soil and the trees. Then the middle wave. Then the rear. The old growth went quiet. The ley lines settled. The wrongness under the ground. The fault line fracture of the convergence's arrival. Smoothed over slowly, like water resettling after impact. Alara stood at the perimeter. She was breathing hard. Not from exertion, from the magnitude of it. From the sheer volume of what had just moved through her. From the fact that the bond was real again, restored, humming between her and the dark wolf standing 30 feet ahead of her at the tree line. Golden eyes turned back to find her through the settling chaos. The warden turned to look at her. Its enormous silver-gray face held an expression she hadn't seen on it before. The last pale sovereign who used that, it said quietly, brought peace to 3 territories. She looked at her hands. The luminescence under her skin was stronger now. Not glowing in the distracting sense. Just present. Like it had always been there and had finally stopped apologizing for it. Is it over? Dax said from somewhere behind her, slightly breathless. The leading edge, the warden said. There may be. There won't be, Alara said. She could feel the territory. All of it. Like a map drawn in sensation rather than ink. Every ley line, every boundary, every wolf within it. The convergence had exhausted itself on the binding. It won't come back, she said. Not here. She turned. 200 pack wolves stood in various stages of shifted and half-shifted and human, spread across the northern perimeter in the gray dawn light, looking at her. All of them, with a quality of attention that had nothing of the old fear in it. Not the held-breath fear of the first day she'd walked back through the tree line. Something else. Something that lives on the other side of fear when you've been through the worst thing together and come out the other side. She looked at them. All of them. Then she turned back to the tree line. The dark wolf moved toward her. She waited. Chapter 12. He shifted at 10 feet. The familiar wet snap of bones reforming. The brief animal quality of the transition giving way to the man. The same man, always the same man underneath the wolf. And the wolf always there under the man. The two of them more integrated than most people ever allowed themselves to be. He was barefoot in the dirt. She was standing still. He stopped in front of her. For a moment, just a moment, neither of them spoke. She could feel the bond between them now without searching for it. No ghost. No scar tissue. Real, warm, gold. A two-directional current of something she didn't have words for and had stopped trying to force into them. You did that, he said. We did that. He knew what she meant. She watched him feel it. Feel the bond restored, solid and present in his chest. Feel the difference between what it had been and what it was. And she watched his face go through something she had not expected. He looked like he was going to cry. He didn't, because he was still Kale Draven and there were 200 wolves behind them. But his eyes went very bright. His jaw worked once. I felt it, he said. When the bond completed. I felt. The whole territory, she said. Yes. That's what it does, she said. When it's working. He looked at her for a long moment. I need to ask you something, he said. Then ask. Not here. He glanced at the pack. At the 200 wolves who were absolutely trying not to watch them while watching them completely. Later. Ask me later. She considered him. She nodded. He turned back to his pack. Back into Alpha. The structure settling around him the way it always did, comfortable and known, but different now. She could feel it through the bond. The way the restored binding changed the way the pack energy moved through him. Fuller. More complete. He had always been a good Alpha. He was going to be better now. She moved through the pack toward the interior, stopping once briefly to put her hand on Marcus Fenn's shoulder as she passed, feeling him straighten under it, and she found Dax at the edge of the gathering. He handed her a cup of coffee. She stared at it. Where did you get? I have a thermos. I am always prepared. He wrapped his hands around his own cup. Ilara. Dax. You just. He gestured vaguely with his cup in the direction of where everything had happened. All of that. Yes. The silver thing. Yes. The light. Yes. He looked at her. She looked back. He pressed his lips together in the expression of a man trying very hard not to make it into a larger thing than she wants it to be, and also absolutely unable to stop himself. Your grandmother's compass worked, she said. He broke. He laughed, the full, unguarded laugh she'd known since childhood, the one that had always made the hard moments bearable. She let herself smile. Not the small, guarded curve she'd been allowing herself since her return. The real one. The one that reached her silver eyes and stayed there. He pulled her into a hug. She let him. For a long time. The warden left at noon. She walked it to the northern perimeter. Just the two of them, the pack giving them respectful distance. At the tree line it stopped. You don't need me anymore, it said. It didn't say it with grief. It said it with the simple satisfaction of something completing what it came to do. I might, she said. If something else. You won't, it said. What you carry now is fully awake. The territory knows you. The ley lines have your signature. It tilted its massive head. And you have your pack. She looked back at Iron Vale. At the lodges and the fires, and the people moving through the morning with that particular quality of energy that comes after surviving something. Heightened, raw, grateful in a bone-deep way that wouldn't completely settle for days. Your pack. She felt the bond move in her chest. Warm, gold, finding Kale across the distance of the common area as easily as a compass finding north. The compass. She reached into her pocket. She held it out to the warden. It looked at the old brass instrument. My friend's grandmother's, she said. She said it pointed toward what you needed most. Not north. The warden reached out and touched the compass with one massive fingertip. The needle spun, pointed back toward Iron Vale, toward a very specific location within it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she smiled. She closed her fingers around the compass. Thank you, she said. The warden bowed its head, a genuine bow, the formal acknowledgement of an ancient being to something it recognizes as equal. Then it walked into the old growth, and was gone. He found her at the eastern training field fence. She was sitting on the top post, same post she'd occupied 2 weeks ago when Seraphine had come to find her, with the brass compass in her hand, watching the afternoon light move across the mountain. He stopped beside the fence. He didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did she. You said later, she said finally. Yes. Ask. He was quiet for one more breath. Then, what do you want? She turned to look at him. Not what the pack needs, he said. Not what the bond requires. Not what survival called for. He met her eyes. What do you want? What does Ilara Vale want for herself from this, from whatever comes next? She held his gaze. For the first time since she had walked back through that tree line, she let herself sit fully inside the question. What did she want? She had come back for her name. She had it. She had come back to make the pack see what they had lost when they measured her wrong. They had seen it. She had not come back for the bond, for Kale, for the golden thread she'd spent 7 years tending in silence. And yet here she was, with the bond fully restored and alive in her chest, with a man standing in front of her who had hurt her profoundly and owned it without excuse, who had taken apart his own certainties and rebuilt them into something truer, who was standing in this moment with no power over her. None, not anymore, not ever again, and asking her what she wanted because that was the only thing left that mattered. I want to build something, she said. He waited. Not reclaim something. Not return to what was. There's no version of what we were at 23 and 17 that I want back. She was very clear on this. But I want to build something. Here, he asked. Here, she confirmed. With you. If you are. Yes. Immediate. She looked at him. You didn't let me finish. I don't need to. His voice was very steady. Whatever the condition is. Whatever it requires. Whatever pace you need and whatever shape it takes. He held her gaze. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. That infuriating, impossible, silver-warm thing in her chest expanded slowly. She looked down at the compass. The needle was pointing straight at him. She let herself laugh, soft, private, just for this moment between these two people. She held the compass out. He looked at it. He took it. He turned it in his fingers the way she'd seen him turn things when he was thinking. That habitual, quiet motion. Then he looked up at her. Not with alpha certainty. Not with the stone-faced control she'd spent years watching him use to manage the world. With something open. Something that had never fully been allowed to exist before now. Can I sit here? He asked. She looked at the fence. At the space beside her. She moved over 6 inches. He climbed up. He sat beside her. They looked at the mountain. The bond moved between them like warmth from a fire. Present, real, asking nothing, offering everything. The pack settled into its evening rhythms below them. Dax, crossing the common area, looked up, saw them, made a face that was extremely composed for someone who was visibly delighted. She looked away before she smiled. She didn't fully succeed. Ilara. For what it's worth. He paused. Every time I tried to talk myself out of what I felt, every rational argument I made, every time I said the pack needed something I couldn't give you. Another pause. My wolf never once believed me. She turned to look at him. His golden eyes, in the evening light, were very honest. It knew, he said simply. She held that. She thought about the hollow, about the ancient presence asking her, "Are you certain you are ready to find out what you contain?" She thought about what she'd found. Not just power, not just transformation. Herself. Whole, clear, unargued with herself. And the thing she contained, it turned out, underneath the silver, underneath the sovereign's gift, underneath everything the hollow had given back to her, was this. The capacity to build something real from the ruins of something broken. The willingness to try. Your wolf, she said, has excellent judgment. She felt him go very still. Then, from beside her, not performative, not the careful, controlled quality of everything he usually allowed himself, a sound that was almost a laugh. Genuine. Quietly, helplessly genuine. Like someone remembering what it felt like to be a person. The mountain went gold in the last of the afternoon light. She breathed. For the first time in a very long time. Longer than the hollow, longer than the rejection, longer than all the years of measuring herself by standards designed to miss her entirely. She breathed without bracing. Just breathed. Like the next moment was somewhere she wanted to go.